Welcome to episode 4 of blind grading, and this is not a series where I'm grading blindfolded. Unfortunately, maybe that could be fun to do in the future, but instead I'm grading clips that are sent from you guys that I don't know what camera comes from or what log profile is shot in, and I attempt to grade it as best as I possibly can with the tools that we have in DaVinci Resolve. Now, for today's clip that was sent by Gustavo, I actually do know that it was shot with an FX3, but I don't know the exact color profile that he shot in. So while I already know that it's coming from Sony, it's always the Sony profiles that I try to work with first. And if you want to see something that is from clips that I didn't know where anything came from, you can take a look at the previous episodes. But the difference in this one is that he actually sent a couple of clips, and one of them was this night shot of a mountainside cliff, something that I haven't graded before. I don't grade much nighttime shoots, so I thought it could be fun to do this as a blind grading, seeing as I don't know what it looked like in real life, and the only thing I know is that it came from a Sony FX3. Knowing that there's great dynamic range, I thought it could be fun to see what we can get out of this shot and how we would go about grading a nighttime scene to get it looking good, at least to my preference. So with that said, let's jump into DaVinci Resolve and have a look at how we'd go about it. All right, so I'm taking the clip inside DaVinci Resolve, and this is what we're working with. I'm quite excited to see what we can do with this. I'm going to try to get a more teal and orange look to make the shadows more cool and dark, and then get the nice bloom from the highlights. So without knowing what exactly color profile it's shot in, let's just make a few notes and call this one convert. We're gonna have a color space transform on it. And as we do know that it's Sony, it's most likely in Sony S-Gamut 3 or Cine, or just the normal one. I think I'm gonna go with Cine, and then we're gonna go with Sony S-Log 3, as that's the most common one, Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4. That gives us quite the dark image, so we could go with S-Log 2 instead. But as it was a night scene, I think S-Log 3 gives us a nicer image overall. So we're not gonna spend too much time actually figuring out the color space transform, because working with Sony footage, I know that we can already do quite a lot. So let's just convert it as is to Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine and S-Log 3. And then into Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4 and go from here. Then I want to add some balance, some exposure, and some contrast changes here before we head into anything more. Now, because it is a nighttime scene, I'm not sure how much we should do with the contrast here, so we can pull it down a little bit and maybe make things a little bit brighter, but we don't want to go too far. It's already getting quite dark. So let's just go into the exposure here and raise the shadows, so we get some of that detail back in those areas. That's already better. And see if we can just lower the highlights a little bit as well. So kind of going against what we just did with the contrast. And if we're just seeing, we do get a nice amount of contrast from doing this and a little bit more sharpness overall. So we're turning both of these on or off, we do get a better result. So I will stick with this. And I think when we're looking at the waveform, if we take the qualifier here, we do have information lying all the way down here, so we're not clipping in the shadows, which is good, thanks to the dynamic range of the FX3 here, and everything looks pretty good overall. We have a few things that are clipping, but that's just lights that wouldn't have any information anyway, so that makes perfect sense. And for the balance, let's just see if we need to do anything here. I do think everything looks pretty okay already. I'm just gonna try and move my waveform around a little bit here, try and see where we can get things. I think it does look nice if we turn it a little bit up towards the orange here. So we're just warming up everything a little bit more. I think that looks good. So that's kind of the vibe that we're going with anyway, so we might as well just balance it out in the beginning. And these lights tend to be warmer when we're working with nighttime scenes anyway, so it makes sense. Now we're gonna head into some primaries here and some curves. And for this, I'm really gonna try and emphasize the teal and orange look. So let's add 2 in the left and 1 in the green here, 2 in the blue, 1 in the green, and -1 in the reds here, just to get that teal cool look in the shadows. And then we're going to go opposite here in the highlights to go a little bit more warm and then reduce a little bit of that blue. Now we might have gone a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to add a little bit more red, and you can see we are losing out some of that red, so I'm going to add a little bit in the mid here as well, just to try and balance that out. I'm adding a little bit of green, a little bit of red, because I don't want to lose too much of that orange color, but I still want the blues here, or the shadows, to be more teal. So I think overall that did a pretty good job. We could maybe emphasize the teal even more, just like so. I'm looking at what I'm doing at the vector scope here at the same time as I'm doing it. I'm trying to move the blues down towards the teal mid here between the blue and the cyan. And now things are looking pretty opposite of each other, which I like. We got that teal, nice, cool tone in the shadows and in the sky here. And then we got that warm, nice light in the highlights, which is what I would want to go for here. We head into the curves and we're trying to do some hue versus hue and some teals here. What we can do is we can try and balance out the lights even more by just trying to center them a little bit more around that orange color here in the middle, dragging down the reds a little bit and adding up in the green yellows here to try and center that information that is in here with the color. If your histogram is not moving around, it's because it's not set to output. That's how I like to do it, so I can see what I'm actually affecting and moving around. And then for the teals, I kind of just want to move this down. I want to make sure that they are lying in that teal area. So I'm really gonna emphasize that teal and orange tone. So if I turn it off, you can see this is what we came from, and turn it on, everything is a little bit more narrow, lying a little bit more opposite of each other. And what I'm really trying to do is get things to look more or less exactly opposite of each other. So I just adjusted it a little bit more to get that more teal opposite of the yellow here, or the orange. And with that, I'm starting to get pretty satisfied with where we are at. So this was before and this is after. It's not a huge change, but it did do a little bit. And looking at this, I might go back into the exposure and just turn up the shadows quite a bit more here to get some more information out, and maybe reduce the highlights a little bit more as well, just to get more information overall, at least for starters now. Looking at the waveform, seeing where that lies, I think that's pretty good, just to get a little bit more to work with. And with the rest of this here, I think we're just going to make an inside and an outside node here. So this will be our inside and this will be our outside. And I'm just going to put some emphasis on the middle here, because that's our main focus. If I could drag this down like so, pull this out a little bit, something like that, and then just add a tiny bit more contrast, but not too much in the shadows, a little bit more in the highlights here, just to make it pop a little bit more. And then for the outside area, I'm just going to darken it down with the gamma a little bit, something like this. The outside node just selects the opposite of what our inside node selected, so we can darken that down and we can put a little bit more focus on the middle, just adding a little bit more gamma here as well to brighten it up. And it just gives us that nice glow overall. We have that bloom. I'm assuming it's shot with like a mist filter or something, which looks really good. And overall, I'm pretty satisfied with where we're getting at now. Now, it might not be as teal and orange as I would like it. So if we were to do anything different here, I might try and push even more teal into the lift here. Just really try and emphasize that teal color and really try and stretch out the colors here by trying to move them opposite of each other, just really trying to push out the colors as much as possible. And it gave us a lot more contrast now with that really teal here in the shadows and that more strong orange overall in all the highlights around here, both in the buildings and everywhere else. And the only thing I see now is that maybe we have a little bit too much noise. So that's easily fixable in the paid version of DaVinci Resolve. So if we were doing noise reduction here, we can head into this one, which is the noise or the motion effects. And if we use spatial, we can choose enhanced, and small is fine. And then we're going to turn it up quite a lot here. Take it down until we don't see an effect as much. Don't need it to be that much. So 25, we'll get rid of most of it. Around 30 is a pretty good set point. And now we can see this is with it off and this is with it on. So we're just kind of cleaning up everything quite a lot. And while it's not a major thing or a major update, it does make it look a little bit more clean overall in these areas that we brightened up quite a bit. This is what we ended up with overall. So from going from this after we converted it into this with not that many adjustments, but getting that teal and orange color balance or color contrast, really balancing out the colors and getting something nice. I think that looks really good. And it all came from just going with the Sony S-Gamut 3 Cine and the S-Log 3 as I knew it was shot on a Sony, and that's, I think, the most common one to use. So that made it a little bit of cheating in this one, but I was quite interested in grading a nighttime scene and seeing what we could do. And I really think this looks nice for what we had to work with. And I really like to make that color contrast in scenes like this. So with that said, I don't have any more for you today. If you have any questions, ideas for this series that you want me to grade, please leave a comment down below. And I'm always happy to answer any questions that you might have. And with that said, I'll catch you in the next video.